Looking to go deeper with your learning? Come and see what we've been working on at anchoredoutdoors.com. Want to check it out for free? I will drop the link in the episode description below. There's nothing really set in stone.
Okay.
Sounds
Okay.
good. I just walked out of the office, so I get it. I'm still shifting into fish mode versus work mode. So
Right.
apologies
Okay.
in advance.
What's your quote unquote real job?
I manage a lobbyist and government relations firm and a law firm here in Edmonton. So
All right. Sounds actually quite
on the
interesting.
other hand, I haven't been at work for a month and a half, and I've been fishing with Heath for 3 weeks, and then in Drumheller fishing, and then in southern Alberta fishing. So, yeah, my name is pretty much mud right now at the office.
And how do you and Jim know each other?
Actually, that's kind of a neat one, eh?
Yeah, yeah. It goes back a little ways, not too far, but
2020, I think I took my first course with Jim, and then the rest sort of steamrolled after that. So,
yeah,
What kind of course? A fishing course?
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
right.
I
Okay.
grew up in Lethbridge, and so I used to fish the Crow's Nest Pass and everything down there when I was a kid for years and years. And when I moved up to Edmonton, I used to work in the trades down there, and so I had lots of time on my hands in the afternoons and evenings to go fishing. But after I moved to Edmonton, I sort of gave up on it for a while, and then Jim was my reintroduction to my mental health breaks and sanity and all things that go good with it. So that's when we started refishing again, and I met some really good friends in that course, and we've been going hard at it ever since.
Cool. I know we're not officially rolling yet, but I think I'm actually going to include that if that's okay. We might just
Yeah.
pick up let's pick up right there. Okay, cool. Jim, anything you want to elaborate on as far as how you guys met?
We did this, fishing course thing with John and another trout trust person, Heath Freeman, and we've fished some since then, and also, relevant to what we're going to do right now, we all found ourselves in the same sort of place opinion wise about what's going on with the fisheries in Alberta and what's good about it and what's not so good about it, and we've sort of started asking each other, what do you think we can do anything? And so John has been really, really important in keeping us organized and knowing how
I
organizations
try.
operate. Yeah. Well, it's a tough task. I know that.
And just confirming, this was in 2021?
That was about 2020, and then we've sort of we after I tried after Jim tried to train all my bad habits out of me, from in fishing for a week or two, over the last couple of years. Then in about 2024, I'd say, hey Jim, probably early 2024.
Yeah. I think that's about right. Yeah.
We were sitting around, and my full-time job, a big part of it is government advocacy and working with, uh, ministers and departments and things like that. And I was meeting with the recreational and what would be the minister responsible for fisheries and his staff. And I'm like, who's on your stakeholder list? Who do you guys call when you want to change regulations and do things? And the minister at the time, it's not the minister now, but he's like, well, we got a pretty small group. If you're a hunter, we got lots of guys. We've got fish and wildlife, we got the hunt guys, we've got the promo guys, we got the gun dealers, we've got lots of people. But the fishing side is a lot less strong or organized in the province, in terms of who comes to the table for some consultations. You get some of the great shop owners and those guys. They're an integral part of the system. You get a couple of the true advocates that show up and rally and do things like that. You get some conservationists in that mix, but the sage group of what I call, the wise and understanding fishermen and anglers in the province, like Jim and like Gary and these guys who have done this. They've seen the changes, they see how things have progressed over the years, and there's no better advocate for the fish than that group. And so when it came to my attention that there was a very limited pile of consultation stakeholders, and some of them were guys who worked for government or guys who were fishing buddies of somebody who worked in government. It was time to look at it and go, well, maybe they're not hearing the whole story. And we encourage everybody at the firm to take on some pro bono work and, pick something they love. And if I'm not working or parenting, I'm fishing. And sometimes it's not in that order, like this month. So, we had sort of brought it up to the group of the Trout Trust guys and folks that are there now, and said maybe we can send a better message to government and encourage government to look at stakeholders in a more serious way, or at least be more organized for them. As you know, sorry, Jim, I'm using it, and it's going on a T-shirt. We agreed on it when Heath and I were fishing. We're making Cheer for the Fish T-shirts for our next fishing extravaganza next summer. But we want to cheer for the fish, and part of that is looking at what type of advocacy role these people can play towards going forward with government. And the group in particular, Jim and the group in Calgary had decided that a big part of that was entrainment. And so that's sort of the first project for the Trout Trust, is to explore entrainment. And it was timely with the government and their reports and things like that have come forward recently.
I have many, many questions. Is that the case, Jim, where the angler is relatively unorganized at that time?
Well, I think they were probably unorganized is a fair word, but also fragmented would be a good word too. I mean, there's plenty of concern, but no sort of overriding structure or even objectives, and that's kind of what we thought. It all started for me when the provincial government brought out a report on a declining population of fish in the Bow River, and it seemed to a lot of us who kind of read their report that they were getting ready to lay the main part of the blame for this on angling mortality as sort of a first step, because it's easy to change the regulations on fishing methods, fishing seasons, that sort of stuff. And just a number of us, Gary Hankey and Nate Raymond and me, and once we got John and Heath on board, all felt the same way, that that shouldn't be the first step, especially when they identified two other likely causes of this decline in population, that being unstable flows from the dams upstream of Calgary, and then this entrainment issue, which entrainment is it's a word that we've become very used to, but it may not mean something to everyone if it's the first time you heard it. It means fish that are lost to the irrigation canals. There are a lot of irrigation canals on southern Alberta trout streams, and there are two significant ones on the Bow River. And what happens is those canals are managed to carry plenty of water through the farming season, the irrigation season, through the spring and summer. And then when that's all done in fall, usually October sometime, the canals are turned off, and any of the fish that have moved into these canals are done. The water they're living in dries up. And so there's never been any significant effort to address this issue. So the Trout Trust it's one of the first things that got us fired up, and it's one of the first, I guess, target or objective for us, is to try and bring attention to that and to get acknowledgement of the issue from the provincial government.
So I had
the question was,
no, but this is great. I had to look up entrainment last night, actually, and that's kind of what I found. But I thought I was missing something, because I was thinking, well, surely it can't be responsible for the demise of that many fish. Is that true? What percent of fish is it taking?
John, do you know what they?
Yeah. So how big is the problem? I mean, it's a significant one, and it's one that's grossly overlooked by regulators. In fact, just until recently, in some of the reports coming out from Alberta, it hadn't really been explored as fully as it should have been. But to give you an idea, since 2001 to about 2023, just in the Carsland Canal system around Calgary, they averaged about 18,000 rainbow trout and about 80,000 whitefish lost every year. So it may not seem like a lot, but when you get to an extreme year, and this is just in that Carsland Canal system, this isn't, through the main river, this is lost into the canals. And these are estimates, of course, and they're from the government reports. But in 2021, when we had a high watermark year, Almost the estimates are 25% of the entire Bow River rainbow trout population was lost to high canal flows, pulling in more fish than usual. So on average, the estimates are about 8.5% of the rainbow trout population is blown into the irrigation canals annually, and whitefish losses could be as high as a third of the population.
And blown into the canals, never to be seen again? Is that what I
Well,
heard? Or
generally they get trapped in these canals, as Jim had mentioned. Part of the challenge is they get pulled in with the water because there's no other real filtration system, and there's a number of solutions worldwide that have been implemented in various jurisdictions to prevent this. But once inside, they're trapped in that fast-moving water into the canals, and then they end up either in overheated shallow pools when we get time of day restrictions or hoot owl restrictions, and they can't survive due to loss of oxygen, or they die in the canals when they're shut off at the end of the year, at the end of the season. And if not, then they're stuck in these shallow canals with almost no water in it, and they'll freeze solid. So, and it's the challenge there is that this happens every year. It's not a one-off event, and it is directly related as well to the water flow challenges that we have. And in and around the Bow River, that's especially challenging because of some of the dam management that's done upstream.
okay. And what about organizations like Trout Unlimited and some of the other more local chapters societies?
Yeah. Well, Trout Unlimited has played a big role in one in a project related to this since I think it was 1998. They started what was called the Trout Rescue, which was they gathered a bunch of volunteers in the fall, just prior to when the canal was going to be shut off, or the canals were going to be shut off, and they would electrofish the canals, catch as many fish as they could, and put them in a hatchery truck and take them back to the river and put them in the river. And they've continued to do that every year, and they've saved a lot of fish, but that's not a solution. First of all, these fish rescues occur on a small portion of a big canal, and so they're only getting a small percentage of the fish that are lost. And unfortunately, the whole trout rescue has been kind of I guess misunderstood or misinterpreted by a lot of people, including a lot of pretty passionate anglers. And that is, they think, oh, well, it's a good thing they've got the trout rescue because they can get those fish back in the river where they belong. Yeah, some of those fish, but that's not a solution. In fact, at the very beginning, when this was first started by Trout Unlimited, they said that the solution to the problem of fish entrainment from the Bow River is not a fish rescue. It's to install structures to prevent them coming into the canals in the first place. And that was 1998, and nothing has changed since then. And I don't mean to go on too long here, but the other thing that's been really annoying to us is that this issue of fish being lost to irrigation canals in southern Alberta was first identified and delivered to the Alberta government in, wait for it, 1910.
What?
Yeah, that's what we said. Wow.
How?
Yeah.
How? Okay, well, you work in government, John. I'd love to hear this.
I work with government, not in government, and it's a matter of sense of priorities. And I always like to say this squeaky wheel sometimes really does get the grease. And often people come to the table with complaints and without, some sort of efficacy to looking for reasonable solutions or being good partners. And when we talk about rescue efforts not being enough, one of the challenges there is that it does save thousands of fish. There were, I think, 2022 in that fish rescue that Jim had talked about. They saved about 9,000 fish in 10 hours in the Carsland Canal. But most of the ones that are entrained don't get saved. And that's because it does happen at the end of the season. It doesn't happen at the beginning of the season when they're pulled in. So by then you've already made it through time of day restrictions. You've already made it through shallow waters with high predatorship, and other things like that. Albeit very dated in 2003, they did an entrainment study, and the government study said only about 1.3% of the rainbow trout pulled into canals are ever recovered back, either through rescue efforts or fish diversion efforts and things like that. So it's a very, very, very small population. And again, it's months later. It's just too late to save most of those fish, and that prevention is really the aid there. But working together with government, instead of trying to be either a thorn, or if you are a thorn, come with constructive solutions and partnering with other stakeholders and players so that everybody can work together and not against each other is a big part of it. And there's lots of problems in society and community. And the job of the Trout Trust is to try and have government realize that trout and entrainment is one of them. Because there's a lot of other things in parks and rec that we've seen in Alberta in probably at least in the last 5 to 10 years. There's been major changes in everything from random camping and government lands to to the hunting side and tickets and permitting. But the actual fish regulations and pieces have, and specifically entrainment, haven't really seen sort of the attention that probably definitely that we would like to see, but that they deserve.
Are these naturally reproducing fish, or are they all introduced?
Yeah.
Yes, they're introduced. The whitefish were not introduced. The whitefish and all of the forage fish, the bait fish and stuff that also are included that get lost in the canal. The little fish that the big trout eat. Anyway, those are all not introduced. Those are native fish. The rainbow trout and brown trout in the Bow River are not native, but they were introduced. The brown trout, and I think I want to say 1915, and the rainbow trout, I believe sometime in the 1940s. And they are wild fish for sure. They're naturally reproducing wild fish.
Yeah.
There haven't been fish stocked in the Bow in 80 years or something like that.
Are there any other fisheries or places in the world that have got this same issue at this capacity, or at these numbers?
Yeah, it's pretty common anywhere you've got canals. You've probably got the problem or the potential for the problem. We did some, NADA did some looking, and there's, for example, April, it goes on in Australia.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Yeah, the Murray-Darling Basin, which I don't know.
Oh, yeah, fish that lots.
Yeah, the right sort of. I should back up and say that the solution to this, there are a number of different types of installations, physical structures that can keep the fish from coming in, and there's a number of different types of them, depending on the type of stream and all sorts of things. But the technology exists in a number of different ways to keep fish in the rivers and out of the canals. And in this example, we found in the Murray-Darling Basin, I'm just reading this, fish protection screens have reduced fish entrainment by 93 to 100%. And so it has been a problem that has been addressed in many other places, in the U.S. and in Europe and in Australia and New Zealand.
So if it's as easy as a screen, how many canals are there in your region?
Well, on the Bow, there's those two, and I guess I don't know the total number, but the other significant rivers in southwestern Alberta, the Old Man River Basin and the Bow. So there are canals coming off both those and some of their tributaries, the Old Man and the Belly River and the Waterton River. All have these issues. John, I'm leaving some out, probably missing some, but
yeah, well, we have to remember what the whole southern half of southern Alberta looks like. It's some of the richest irrigated farmland in the world. I mean, it's one of the largest grain producing regions, and that's why working together with other partners is really important. There's canals everywhere. Irrigated farmland is a highly sought after commodity in this area, and given the canola and wheat and other productions there, irrigated farmland in a semi-arid desert structure like we have in that southern Alberta space and south of Calgary makes just for a really good combination of lots of sun hours, rich soil, but it's dry as heck, so you got to plumb a lot of water through there. And so working with the irrigation districts, to look at possible pilots for fish screen retrofits, working with the farmers and the farmer groups, with things like the Foothills Energy Co-ops for sustainability and river health. These are all important sort of next steps with the Bow River sustainability groups that are already there that are focused on Bow River health. And that's sort of the entrainment is a province-wide issue. It just happens at this point to be more focused on the Calgary and Southern Alberta region, with a focus on the Bow River for now, because it is the most important fishery, or one of them in Alberta, and one of the most important trout streams, in North America. And so watching the idea and trying to come to grips with the fact that you may lose 25% of your fish in a year if it's a high water year, but we recognize this doesn't come without hurdles. I mean, whenever you put something in front of an irrigation canal, you're slowing down water flow. You're causing disruption in the irrigation systems. Now, some of the solutions Jim talked about are they're not only fish-friendly designs, but there are ways to work with bypass and escape channels, behavioral deterrents like lights and sounds and bubblers and curtains that may not be as effective as a gate, but keep the fish away. So there's a lot of technology and research there. Looking at for new canals, licensing requirements for canal users and the systems for a fish friendly canal design, like smoother flows, lower intake velocities, designs that reduce trapping, maybe some monitoring and looking at cameras or fish tags to help measure success and adaptive systems. And of course, as we mentioned, fish screens are by far one of the most cost effective, but at the same time come with a few other issues. But the Australia version at the Murray-Darling Basin is a good example where those screens are made locally. So it helps grow that internal economy. They are eco-friendly in terms of how they're built, and the screens actually self-clean. So if they do start to get clogged up with debris and weeds and all the other things that will happen, it sort of flips over, opens itself up, lets everything flush down the canal, and then closes back up again. So it isn't ideal. You're going to get some fish through, but it's not going to be the same number as if you could just have the little guys swim upstream into the canals when the flush comes through. So these barriers let the water flow, but again, keep the fish out. And so it's important to look at all of the different technologies that are there, because each of these canals may require a different solution. And that's where we want to lean on government to say, okay, we know there's stuff out there. We know that, you're going to have a little bit of pushback and blowback from some users of water in Alberta, but we think we can get around that. Irrigation is $1 billion industry in Alberta, and there are small incremental changes that can make large differences to the fishing and the angling populations.
How big are the holes in this? Oh, sorry, Jim. I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
Go ahead.
Oh, no. Go ahead. What would you add? And then I'd love you to answer how big the holes are.
I was just going to add that this, we understand that irrigation is necessary and beneficial in Southern Alberta, and we're not. Our objective is not to stop irrigation. Our objective is to stop the fish. Take the water that you need, as long as it's managed properly, but leave the fish in the river. That's the objective. We're not trying to slow down irrigation, or we're not confronting the irrigation industry with something they don't want to do. That's for sure.
Is that something you've had pushback before with? And what would the agenda be? Everyone always, I would assume you've been hit with the occasional raised eyebrow with someone questioning your agenda, but what would that agenda be?
Well, yeah, and I think this is probably part of the reason the angling population in Alberta remains sort of fragmented, because it's a funny thing, that we haven't had a lot, but we've had some. Raised eyebrow was a perfect way of describing it, from, for instance, from other conservation organizations who perhaps perceive us, before they understand what we're trying to do, perceive us as some kind of a threat or a competitor for the money that they need, something like that. And so we've seen some of that. I think that's dissipating as these groups look at what we're trying to do, and that we're not a competitor to other conservation groups. But yeah, again, what was the question?
Just what the biggest contention is, what the point of contention is, because to me it just sounds so simple. We haven't spoke about numbers, but it doesn't sound overly expensive, and I'm
It's
just
all
wondering.
expensive.
Okay.
April, that's the challenge. I mean, it's not expensive when you look at $1 billion industry of irrigation and irrigation canals, or the farming industry. You know, in if we put it into relative terms, it's literally a drop of water in a giant pool. If we're talking about expense, at the same time, it's not free, and there is always a competition for resources. A dollar spent on a fish bypass channel or an entrainment screen is a dollar that could be spent in healthcare, or it could be a dollar spent on conservation enforcement. And so it's really a balance of competing interests on where the money should be spent. And part of the advocacy of groups like the Trout Trust is, hey, government, there's a group of us, and it's not a small group, that think this is an important priority, and it may be as important as enforcement, or it may be and that there are other benefits that you might be overlooking by addressing entrainment issues. For instance, the tourist industry for fishing in the Calgary area, and the guiding shops and the taxes collected and the guiding hours and permits and all the rest of it. These aren't small endeavors either. These are livelihoods of Albertans that cherish their outdoor time on the rivers and on the lakes. And if we can adopt systems that have very low marginal cost, compared to the industries that they represent, that's on that's on the financial piece. The other one is it's just doing the right thing. And that may seem strange, but these are natural rivers for the most part, and dams be damned. But these are natural rivers that we are taking as society water from to service our own interests, like crops, like entertainment and recreation. And if we're going to do that, and we're going to be users of these environmental pieces of our land, we should be good stewards of the land, and we should do it in a way that's responsible. Just because we can pollute doesn't mean we should be able to. Just because we can take water from a river to help generate electricity doesn't mean we shouldn't be conscious of fish design when we're building dams or working with irrigation canals.
When we say canal, are we talking about man-made canals? I know that might sound silly,
Yes.
but I'm from a part of the world where, in BC anyway, we've got very natural canals that
These are
We do
lead
not.
back. You don't. Okay.
These are all for the most part, the majority are miles and miles and miles of larger scale irrigation canals.
Are they mostly on private water or land?
That's a difficult question. The answer is no, but the answer is also sort of yes, because the most of the land that the irrigation canals are that they are situated on are owned by the irrigation association.
Oh, there's an irrigation association.
Right.
The plot thickens. That must be fun.
Well, actually, to be frank, the irrigation associations in Alberta are wonderful groups that have, the concern of water and water conservation and responsible use right at the very heart, because they recognize it's a valuable resource. And so, again, working together and not against each other, the hope is that the Trout Trust can work with irrigation associations and the farming groups to come up with solutions that maybe we can work a little bit more dedicated towards getting government attention and funding for these types of solutions.
Can we talk a little bit about what these nets or screens look like, as well as what they do cost? Because I'm just trying to wrap my head around. Have you ever seen those? They're almost like a net bag. It's been so long since I've spoke about it, but they collect garbage in different parts of the world. They're rubbish collectors. Do you know what I mean? It's like a big mesh bag that they attach so that it stops the garbage from flushing out. What do these screens look like? Are they actual screens? Are they nets?
No, they're actual screens. The Australian ones in the basin and we were talking about, they're giant cones. They're inverted. They're a giant cone that fits over an irrigation canal going out. If the water flows in, they self-flush. You know, easy to Google, easy to find lots of information on these self-cleaning irrigation screens. You know, and they're installed at the entry points so that when the water comes in, there's one little step down and it runs through these screens. And if it needs to be cleaned, it circulates a little gizmo at the top. I'm not going to call it a cutter because it's a cleaner. It just self cleans itself off. It falls into a collection point and then it can be collected and taken away. Some of the other screens are mesh type style screens that I was talking about earlier that are installed at the entrance points or just inside the entrance points, and they have sort of a spring loaded design where as it gets sort of as it slows down due to weeds or other debris, it just flips itself around and self cleans it off, and then it just keeps flowing. So for the most part, it's fairly uninterrupted flow of the canal space. The one I think that's very interesting, and again, well, we have some experts that work with us, and we've got a great group of volunteers, and at the Trout Trust. The fishery experts are experts. And so there is a point where we need to rely on them to say, in this situation, we know these different solutions exist. We want to work with you on a pilot project, or we want to work with you to come up with looking at these and identifying what may be the most effective or on a balance of cost, cost effective solutions. So these ideas of sound or bubble curtains, that guide fish away, it could be as simple as there are some type of fish, not necessarily the trout style, where predator birds are, plastic decoys are anchored in the canal. And that's enough to scare, a small or a medium size of the population to turn around and say, hey, we're not going down that way. We're pulling the U-turn and we're going back. I mean, these are very cost effective solutions with very low maintenance. And with the improvements in solar and self-generating energy from, sort of the river flow, working that into the self-cleaning and the tidal space or in that self-cleaning space, it's not a huge burden on electricity or on grid use or anything like that either.
And cost? I mean, just a range. You've given me a number of options, but what's the cost average?
It's one of these things where it's a customized solution, right? You can order them, you can build them, but it really depends on size, scope, scale, what type of technology you're working with. A lot of the smaller, water bubble intakes and things like that, bubble curtains and sounds, there's minimal cost to this. When we talk about some larger scale, like the ones that may be required after a pilot project on some of the entry points on the two main canals out of the Bow River, there's going to be some significant costs. It's not going to be hundreds of thousands. It's going to be in the small millions. But I mean, when we're talking billion-dollar industries and life expectancies of some of these devices are, it's not months, it's years.
Right. Okay. Anadromous fish. Do you have these same issues with any Atlantic salmon or with salmon or steelhead? Not in not in Alberta, obviously, but I mean, just have you heard of this happening with maybe fish in BC?
I've seen some just kind of in passing, and I didn't really absorb the information, but I think I've seen some of this stuff with Pacific salmon, maybe in Washington or Oregon. John, what have you seen with that?
Yeah, that's more of a NADA question, frankly, because she's,
Yes.
In that she's in that research space a lot higher than I am in this one. So that's something we can get back to you on, though, for sure.
Yeah, very curious.
Atlantic salmon, I'm not sure. I just don't know.
I guess the fish just maybe they know better, or they have to turn around. I have no idea.
Well, the thing about it here, I mean, the fish, they can be happy and live their life, I presume, contentedly in the canal, because they don't know that the water's going to be shut off. If they knew when it was going to be shut off, they'd probably leave, but they don't. And depending on how far they are from the main river and whether they could get back, or it's just, they don't know that the water is not going to be there in another month or two.
Who named it Trout Trust?
I don't know. We threw around a bunch of names and just settled
The
on
one,
that one.
it's the one that popped out. Yeah.
How many of you were there during all of this?
I don't know, 6, 8.
I was gonna say start with 6 or 7. Yeah, a handful and a half.
Was there a certain segment in the angling crowd that made it difficult? For example, in British Columbia, we've had pushback from bait anglers, or you get pushback from indigenous communities. Was there a part of the angling community specifically that was that you had some pushback with?
I don't, not a lot. There was, as you said, this sort of raised eyebrow. People, I mean, people wondered about the cost, and in some very small cases, there people were a little bit of a defeatist attitude, like, oh, that'll never happen. You'll never get that.
Yeah.
And so there's some of that, but as I said, the more people look into this, the more that they realize it's the right thing to do. But when you have a conversation with this about this with someone, with anyone, nobody says, well, I'd rather the fish died in the irrigation canals. Like it's
Yeah, I
not
hope not.
pretty easy. It's a pretty easy opinion to settle on, So, and we've just got some notes here. I'm referring to the Trout Trust. We've intentionally positioned it not as a competitor but a connector from other conservation groups, and to try and get a little better organized, and our role that we as a bridge group would be to organize angling voices, to gather and convene stakeholders, crafting the clear asks of government, and then taking them to government in a way that they will receive it as a serious and necessary thing to address. And this, John's kind of said this, but entrainment is where we're starting, but there are other things beyond that. And I guess the other, not really pushback, but questions we've had from concerned people about it was the question I've heard is this the most important issue about the most important water related issue in Alberta? And the answer is no, it's not the most important one, but we think it's a necessary one. It's a high profile, easy to generate support for objective.
And didn't have a lot of champions.
Yeah.
Right. There was a lot of people talking about it. Everybody's like, yeah, it's a big problem. We understand that there's a challenge here for government. We understand that there's a challenge for the fish, but there's advocates for other, areas that include other stakeholders. There's a large, there's a large mining advocacy population. There's a large, population that talks about changing permitting and things like that. But the entrainment piece really wasn't getting the attention we thought it deserved, especially since it has a tangible solution, that's really within arm's reach of making it, go through to the next step. We know it's preventable. The science is clear. The tools exist to fix it. Alberta's own government reports back the science, and that we're losing fish to entrainment. And really, it was just the will and the partnerships that need to make it happen at this point.
I have a silly question. What happens? So they die, right? I know this all depends on when, where, and how. But so the fish die. What happens to this great number of fish? Do they pile up? Do they sink to the bottom? Does the water become rich with fish fertilizer? Do they stink?
Yeah, a lot of them just move through the system naturally. Whether it's through predators, whether it's through decay. In fact, one of the interesting parts about the sampling, as I understand it from some of our group who are, more versed in the research of sampling, is that you can go a half a kilometer and find very few fish that have been entrained. And then you'll hit a turn in the irrigation canal that happens to, be the hot spot where everybody wants to hang out with the cool kids, and you'll pull thousands of fish out of this one spot. And so, that's where part of the measurement of the challenge was such a big one, I think, both for government and for stakeholders, is because it isn't a uniform loss. You can't just sample one small section. You're sampling larger sections and in different places of the canals for that loss.
How long does that? Oh yeah, go ahead, Jim.
I just say that I think the answer to the question about whether they rot or get eaten or just die or pile, I think the answer is probably yes.
All of the above. How long is the average canal?
Oh, I don't know. The main Carsland Canal that goes from near the town of Carsland to, I guess it's McGregor Reservoir, is 66 kilometers, and
long.
Yeah, 66 kilometers long.
Oh,
and
okay.
the fish rescue's taken place on, what is it, John? 1 or 2 kilometers?
Yeah, it's a very, very short stint when we do fish rescue. This isn't something where you're going down that whole piece. So to give you an idea, the Alberta Irrigation Districts Association, which is the irrigation oversight association for all of them, they manage about 8,000 kilometers of canals and pipelines that serve irrigation needs in Alberta.
Wow. Okay. So this is so much more area or land mass than I thought.
Yeah.
Is the fishing better in these spots?
Well, this is one of the challenges, and I defer to Jim on this one, but my take is that a lot of some of the best fishing and angling in Alberta is on the rivers that have the most canals.
We don't need to fix the problem, maybe.
That's right.
Maybe you just need to open up a very expensive pay to play on the canals and then take all of that money and put it back into some sort of conservation.
Keeping the fish out of the canals, yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
That would feel good somehow.
So out of curiosity, say that this is wrapped up and you guys manage this and we're looking a few years down the road. Have you discussed what your next option would be, or what your next project would be, I should say?
Well, yeah, we have, and I think John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've never had a formal vote on it or anything. But I think the next thing we'd like to address would be angler education. It's a big part of hunting. You have to take a hunter training course to identify the things you're going to shoot, and but there's no such thing for fishing. And there's with so many catch and release regulations around, it's imperative that people recognize what they've caught. For instance, the bull trout throughout Alberta have to be released. Well, that means if you're going to fish, you probably ought to know when you've caught a bull trout. And then B is how to release fish carefully, and so that they can have the strongest likelihood of surviving. So there's all kinds of things that we know could be done there, from introducing some of these things into schools and following the lead of the hunting side of things. Has done a really good job with education, or at least a far better job than we have on the angling side.
Yep, I would agree with that. What are you asking for the public to do right now? Anyone listening to this episode, what are you hoping that they will do?
Well, they could join if they're specifically interested in the Alberta situation. There's thetrouttrust.com that has all the information, and we actually have a couple of different kinds of memberships. Our main focus is not on raising a bunch of money at this point. We want to enlarge our voice that we can take to the government. And so, for instance, we have a free membership that just people, they can they indicate their support through that. And we have also a regular sort of a membership. And if they're specific about the Alberta situation, they should write their government representatives, the MLAs, which is ministers of the Legislative Assembly. Is that right, John?
Right. Yep. And we have members of the Legislative Assembly, and there are tools to help with that on the Trout Trust website. So you can sign a petition, you can send a letter to your local elected official. We'd ask that if you are aware of entrainment issues in your community or in your clubs, and or work or volunteer with other angling organizations, let us know so that we can work with you to present and make it, bring awareness to the issue. If you have your own challenges in your communities in angling, we want to know about them too, because this is the one of many challenges that the Trout Trust is going to take a look at over time. And, whether it's education, whether it's regulatory change for things like you guys have in BC. I spend a lot of time in southeastern BC as well. And so, single hooks, single fly, barbless, these are all things that are on the menu somewhere. And, knowing and trying to bring awareness to the various issues and checking temperatures is a big one. As Jim said, have a coffee with your local MLA. Let them know that you're an angler. Most of the time, if they're not sitting in legislative session up here in Edmonton, the elected officials are in their communities. They're in their constituency offices, especially in rural Alberta, where most of these canals and entrainment issues are. The ministers for these departments come from smaller communities up north and down south. And so they're often at the A&W or at the coffee shop having a coffee on a Saturday, talking to constituents, listening to what the concerns are in the community. And so it takes 5 seconds and $3 to have a coffee with somebody and say, hey, this is an issue. And do you know these guys, the Trout Trust, are talking to government? And you may not be the Minister of Environment or Parks and Rec that have to do with regulations or energy, but you're sitting there right next to them half the time of the year when you're sitting up in Edmonton. Tap them on the shoulder and say, my constituents are telling me that entrainment is an issue, that we want to cheer for the fish, that, Alberta has a vibrant angling population, and it doesn't cost that much to be good stewards of the river and conservationists.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Wow. Okay. Now, is there anything, this is obviously I'm a little out of my league with this conversation, but I'm learning along with everyone else, or hopefully along with other people listening right now. Is there anything that I don't know to ask that I should be asking that you guys want to talk about? It's totally open here. So just hijack the mic and tell me what I'm missing.
I don't think so. I did talk to Nada about this yesterday, and I said it would be if the entrainment issue had already been successfully addressed, we could talk to you, or you could ask us, how'd you do it? And we can provide, we could have said, well, here's what we did, here's what didn't work, here's what worked, and that might be of benefit to other people in other situations requiring, government action on something to do with fisheries. But we're not there yet. But maybe in a couple of years we can do that one. But no, I think just I don't know. I'm just looking at this stuff that we sent you, and
is the process moving slower than you thought, Jim?
Oh yeah, what than I thought? No, I knew it would be slow. There's so much
It's been 100 years.
Yeah.
I didn't think we could fix it in 2.
Yeah.
Do they have this in Montana?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
And do you know what they've done to be successful, or is it still a battle?
There's a big project, isn't there, on the St. Mary?
There is, yeah. They've got 2 large projects on the go that include fish screen structures that Montana Fish and Wildlife have put together with Trout Unlimited through the Clark Fork Coalition and state funding. The Morel Creek diversion, where they've got some self-guided structure with some self-cleaning fish screens installed. The South Fork Lower Willow Creek structure, it's got 25 miles of habitat, and they got a bunch of money that they had put into that from both the state and communities. And then they're working on some canal projects as well, as I understand.
Okay, could you talk to those guys?
We haven't yet. We're starting locally and looking globally. I know that Nada has been in contact and Gary, I think, as well, and have reached out to some across the pond into Europe because they seem to be well ahead in terms of screen management. As Jim mentioned, the Australians are one of the leaders in sort of large scale pump screens and things like that. So there's definitely the resources there out there to do it. And so, the organization's only a year and a bit old. And, part of this is taking the first 6 months and determining priorities, saying this is, we've now canvassed, we pulled the audience, if you will, and these are the ones that are on the agenda and on the docket. And which one do we want to start with? The next one is, let's understand it better. Let's make sure we have a good grasp of, where it is, what the status is in Alberta. We've been lucky enough to already have meetings with government to talk about, hey, this is a priority. This needs to be a priority. Is this on your radar? We've been equally lucky that in the last 6 months, year, the government has released a report in Alberta on entrainment, recognizing it as a problem, or as a challenge to government and the fisheries. So it's not, it's now an active, and it just happened to coincide with, the the choice of initial projects for the Trout Trust to start with, and so that was rather convenient and not just lucky, but I'll take both if we can. And so yeah, it's now reaching out to those other experts in those communities, say, how did this work for you? How did you work with government on this? Can we circle back with you guys in a couple of months once we continue to do the research? And the big one, and thank you for having us, is to bring awareness. Because without awareness, you're still just 5 or 8 or 9 folks sitting in a room with a coffee, banging your fist saying that this is still an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's very interesting. I'm happy to learn what entrainment is. I just never would have. I mean, logically it makes sense, but it's just not something that would float to the top of my thoughts. But now I'll be looking at all the canals a little differently. What would it cost, just out of curiosity, just for shits and giggles, to electroshock a canal and physically move all the fish down before any sort of, devastation happened?
Yeah. Who knows?
I mean, it's the Trout Unlimited's fish rescue. It's headed by the TU biologist, but I think most of the work other than that is done by volunteers.
Yeah.
And I think the government is it $25,000 they've put in every year to.
I think that was the kicker piece. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not that costly. I guess you need the truck and somebody to run the truck and the water in the truck and somebody who can electrofish, and those are probably not volunteers. Those are probably fisheries technicians, but maybe they are volunteers. I don't know.
Well, and remember, even through the the concerted effort and the great effort of Trout Unlimited to do that, it's a drop in the population. So we're talking hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of various irrigation canals. So practically speaking, it's a lot easier to keep them out than it is to remove them at the first instance.
I agree. Totally agree. Are you looking for volunteers right now if someone wanted to reach out?
You bet.
Okay, Ben,
and there's a sign up
website
for volunteers. Yeah, there's volunteers on the website. You can sign up to just stay informed and grab extra information on the website. Or, there's some things that cost us a little bit of money, and we run on a not-for-profit basis. Every dollar comes in gets spent on advocacy or general maintenance. You have to pay for a website, and but most of it's run by volunteer web designers, the pro bono efforts from the lobbyists, Jim's time, Gary's time, all of the Dave Eaton, all of the board members, always are actively out there. Excellent, fish advocates, if you will. And so it's a shoestring budget. So, your $25 or whatever it is for a membership is always appreciated.
Perfect.
Okay. And if they got any questions, clarification, or there's a place on the website you can just send an email and somebody will answer you.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, I'll link all this up. Is there anything that you wanted to add before I let you go back to your evening? It's later there.
I don't think so. You sort of asked about things that you should have asked that you didn't. That the end scoop question that us lawyers use all the time too. The unknown unknowns. And I think one of it is that, well, it does in some ways come down to dollars and cents, in spending money for entrainment things. What some of the jurisdictions are finding, like Australia, is that the money that's returned back to the community through taxes, through tourism, through spending, over a period of time, over the length of the livelihood of the infrastructure that is installed, may actually just have itself paid for. It may take 30 years, but if the screen lasts you 30 years, and many of them will, it'll pay for itself back, or it comes close. And I think on the basin study, they actually said it actually paid for itself and then some. So it's a willingness to defer that cost over time for recovery, right? Because it's a little pinch on the way in, but it'll pay for itself over time. And even if it doesn't, again, working to be good stewards, but looking at the other benefits that are there, and the social benefits of being able to have people out on the river and having more fish to catch and having healthier fish populations. And the smile on my face when, I lose my third trout of the afternoon is instead of the second one, because I can't set the hook, I'm told. It makes a big difference, right? That's priceless.
Gotcha. Well, we might wrap it up there. Jim, is there anything you wanted to add besides the fact that John can't set a hook?
I was hoping that wouldn't come up, but it's done now. No, just that I think in the big picture sense of conservation in general, there's never been a time when our environment and wildlife and water, and there's never been a time when it's faced bigger challenges. And I think these group like the Trout Trust or Trout Unlimited, Atlantic Salmon Federation, these are worthwhile groups to support whatever way you can. If you believe in what they're doing, support them somehow. And that would be my main plea, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to end. Posting and reposting on social media is great, but it's not quite enough. We need to be a little more, get our hands a little dirtier there.
Yes, yeah. Cheer for the fish.
There you go.
Perfect.